Hello, everyone. Yes, it's that time again. It's time for another your monthly dose of the Chichester Chats. Of course, me and Lilith are here with the man himself, Mr. DG Chichester. Hello, sir.
Phil, Lilith, good to see you both and be here again and learn new things about myself. So it's always a good opportunity once a month to hold a mirror up and say, oh my God, what was going on there?
And yes, we're covering Blood Syndicate 31 and 32 today. And I just found it funny because I read these on the DC Unlimited app. And in the vein of your West Coast Avengers story, the synopsis for 31 on the DC app is in the aftermath of the long hot summer, the Blood Syndicate tangles with their greatest threat yet.
No way.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yeah.
I am responsible yet again for a group book's greatest threat.
Yes.
Wow. Just when you want your team to really have to, go hard, I guess I'm the guy to call. So that's amazing. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, I just opened it. I'm like, oh my God. I'm like that. I'm like, huh.
But a more, well, that's really kind of funny, isn't it? It's a more, if you want to parallel them, I guess Soulbreaker is a little bit more of a refined version of what was it? The Defiler.
Yes.
In the classic West Coast Avengers.
So I guess that's my first question. How do you come in on fill-ins and rate like the greatest stories of some of these teams?
You can't maintain that level of quality if you're on the book regularly. So you have to work your way up. And I racked my brain. I can't remember the exact mechanics of how I came in on this. Certainly I was thrilled to do it. And although Matt Wayne's the editor listed on it, and certainly obviously I would have worked with Matt and Joe Illidge, who's the assistant editor on it. I have to imagine the offer came directly from Dwayne McDuffie, who I was closer with and friends with. Or maybe Matt called me. I don't remember, but I know, I did have a friendship with Dwayne, which was not a guarantee of getting work. I think Dwayne and myself and Greg Wright and other people who were sort of in something of a circle would sometimes, trade assignments or look within that circle if we needed something. But we were also pretty hard judges of ourselves and each other. So it wasn't nepotism for nepotism's sake. Take it away. It was, you still had to perform and you still had to be up to a certain level of quality. And I know working with Dwayne would have put me in a certain mindset and working within the not constraints of Dakota City, but kind of the largeness of Dakota City, would have put me
Dakotaverse. Yeah.
Yeah. Would have put me on, on notice to really kind of have to step it up. So, I think, in that sort of instance, they, I don't know. I can't remember if they'd hit a gap, in their own scheduling or, but I think it was scheduling in the sense that I was writing the books, to fit the schedule versus I didn't do them as fill-ins, in my mind. They weren't done and then put on the shelf waiting for, we have a gap, we're going to insert these. It was an assignment that had a schedule and a timeline. I feel that pretty, realistically. And I think this presaged then doing the long hot summer, which would have been the little limited Blood Syndicate miniseries, so I think maybe I proved myself to some extent on this. And I think that's when Dwayne offered me that other book.
So it was like your Wolverine story where it's like, yeah, we need someone to fill in for the regular person for an issue or two.
Yeah. I feel like a clairvoyant. I should get my Ouija board out. I'm sensing this is the reason for it, as opposed to other things where I knew I'd written a fill-in issue. West Coast Avengers 38, which, you may not know is known as their greatest adventure ever.
Yes.
Was done as a fill-in issue, right? That was written straight up as a story that would potentially sit on the shelf forever. And then when whatever the regular team was, hit a gap unexpectedly, that was just slotted right in.
Were you familiar with the book? Were you reading the Milestone stuff? Like, I know I wasn't at the time. I came to it like years and years and years later. But I mean, Lilith is super fan.
I was. I knew. I knew Dwayne. I knew Dennis. Well. So when they created and launched Milestone, like a lot of other folks, I was immediately cheering them on and super impressed with what they'd created. Christopher Priest, as well as used to go by Jim Owsley, who I also knew and was a big part of the Bible, right, of Dakota and Milestone. So I read all the initial issues, right? I would say early on, and I guess more aligned with some than others. But I don't think I read them regularly. After a certain point, there's just so much stuff, I guess, going on. You start to get selective even in that day. But I was familiar enough with it to be, not say who's Blood Syndicate, who's Y's son, or whatever. But I did invest myself in this fabulous Bible, as well as surrounding issues. But the Bible, even more so, was to me the codex to kind of unlock what it was all about. Because I think they always stayed very true to that. So that was great to be able to have that kind of document and be able to tap into it and hopefully do justice to it, which I really wanted to do. I mean, it was to me, such a rich mythology and a rich world. I don't want to just come in and say, oh, here's my team dialogue nonsense here and here and here, and just insert it, here's the strong female character. Here's the guy who can pass through things. Here's the sassy character, the sarcastic character. I wanted to try to be, as true to them as I could be.
And it's always like I'm probably asked you this before, but is it more of a challenge to like write a threat that can take a whole team? Whether it's kind of different than like, oh hey, a guy who fighting Daredevil, all he needs is like maybe some ninja skills, but to fight a superpower team, you have to come up with a bigger threat and.
Yeah, it definitely is, and I think more than the threat, in rereading this, now too, and actually being pleased with what I seem to have done. So Lilith, I want your opinion on it, being more tuned into the Milestone world. But I think it's navigating all the characters too, and making sure that everybody gets their moments and their due. Is the tougher thing with a team book, right? It's got to be a threat level that could work with a team, but you've also got to have the chance that you're giving them their moments and then you're giving them their interrelations. So that's a pretty tricky thing, and I really admire folks who do that, not on a here's a guest starring thing or here's a a limited thing, but do that really month after month after month.
So what do you think, Lil?
No, I thought it was really good actually, and I was like, oh, like when I go and think about it, it didn't even occur to me that it was like not the team when I was reading it. I read it from the beginning. It was like a really big thing in my household. In 1993, like it was like a really big deal, and so yeah, like and then like actually I really didn't get into it until like Worlds Collide, that whole thing, and then I actually got to go back and get everything and read it all in like one go for a while. So yeah,
right.
I think when I was initially reading it, it didn't even occur to me. But now that when I reread it, I was like, oh yeah, it still didn't occur to me, even though I knew it was you.
Well, that's good. I mean, that's the you don't want some jarring.
Yeah, it was not jarring at all.
Thing
I thought
good,
very like
good.
Yeah, you blended in very well.
Good. I think that's the more important thing. I mean, it wasn't. It certainly. I know that I've read things where somebody's come in, and they've just said they've either got one act that they can play, or they say I'm going to make my imprint on this, and then it goes very divergently from the feeling of what a book should be or a character should be.
Yeah, I've always been fascinated with Milestone because their Bible is like literally legendary. I mean, they talked about it all the time in Wizard and stuff like that, and that's how I got to know about it. And then as I'm reading it, especially as I got older, I go, yeah, this is solid. Everything fits,
Right.
Just, yeah.
Did they ever release the Bible? Has the Bible ever gotten out in the wild?
I don't think they did.
Yeah.
I really wish that they would for one of these anniversaries or something. I think that would be really fascinating.
It was amazing. It was just an amazing document. It really, really. I mean, I don't have a copy anymore, but I feel
like it would be on like George R. Martin level. There's like family crests and maps.
I don't know that it went quite that far, but I know it had like a ton of, there was so much detail in rereading this, and I don't know if it was, well, I certainly would have known it myself, so I'm having to assume it came out of the Bible, but there was even the one little scene I had where they were passing under the, from Paris Island back to Dakota City proper, and there was the subway, tunnel, the abandoned subway tunnel, the DART tunnel rather. And there was a little backstory around why that was abandoned, and everybody had sort of given up on it. So I don't know if that had come out from an earlier issue story, but it almost feels like it's the kind of detail that was probably in the Bible. And I just said, oh, you know what, I'm going to use that. So that was the richness of it, was character, and the city felt like a living place that had existed before the first issue came out.
Yeah, I love that. I love when people don't forget about the city as a character itself.
Yeah, well, I think that was so important.
It's not called Dakotaverse for nothing.
Right, exactly, right. And it's not, and it's not like just a generic, let's call it Star City. It's a generic, thing. It definitely had, not taking anything away from Star City, which might be a very rich environment, for all I know, but I don't think it compares to Dakota. And you want to live in Dakota a little bit, I think. While there's hard places in Dakota, nobody wants to live in Gotham, right? I'm sorry.
Except for the rent. Except for the rent. It has to be like $2 utilities included.
Exactly. Right. Or it's like I loved at the end of the Batman movie, where Robert Pattinson, Batman's talking to Catwoman. It's like, something about, oh, I'm going to go to Bloodhaven, or whatever. It's like, who the hell is going to go to a town called Bloodhaven? I mean, it's sort of like, it's just, let's name our spaceship Prometheus. Anyway, because that ended well.
Foreshadowing.
BLU, not OO. So
exactly.
Blood.
It's fancy.
Oh, the question I had for both of you is like, yeah, like I never saw these on this is around the time when these first came out. Like I was like transitioning from like the newsstand to like the comic shops. So were these only direct market? Were these ever on the newsstand? Because I never remember seeing them on the newsstand.
I ordered them, so I know specifically that I had to order them.
Right. So. I'm going to say with 92% certainty that these were direct only. Okay. I don't think that these were newsstand publications, and so it feels very much like direct only, sort of thing. So you would have had to go to a comic shop, and at that point, the majority of the business, the uptick of the business, even before it self-destructed itself by leaning into variants and
speculation.
It was much more successful on the direct market than it was on the newsstand market.
Yeah, because I remember like the crossover Lilith was talking about, the Worlds Collide, when they crossed over with Superman, and I picked up the Superman issues on the newsstand, and I'm like, well, why do I find the all these Milestone issues? These are crossing over with.
It was the kinks DC was working out. I give credit where credit is due, but Yeah.
Right. And also, I never read Worlds Collide, but I have to imagine, because that came later on, right, Lilith? That was much further in the run.
It's actually like almost around the time of Long Hot Summer, if I remember right. So.
Oh, it was that? Is that around the time?
It was like, yeah.
Was it like 94, 95, I thought?
Yeah, it was 95.
I mean, I imagine that was something of a strategic...
And I think that's probably why they did it, looking back, is like they do Worlds Collide to get the hype going for Long Hot Summer that's coming in July, if I can remember that.
It was definitely in the summer. I remember that.
Long Hot Summer was July through September 95, and I think Worlds Collide was like May, maybe April or May.
Okay.
Of 95.
Okay. But that would have been call it a gateway drug or whatever, to try to get people who had never picked up a Milestone title to, move over to something, right? Oh, I like Superman. Oh, Superman's dealing with some other characters. Oh, those characters are interesting.
Well, boy, do we have some good characters for you. Hardware, Icon.
Seriously, it's just crazy. It's crazy how fully formed they were, really from it's not crazy considering the people who were behind it. But, there was a richness and an unexpected dynamic, to so many of them, that to my mind.
I thought that Blood Syndicate would have been like the hardest group to write for sure, because they have so much interpersonal like drama between them,
which actually makes it interesting. In some ways, that makes it easier. Rereading this, and again, your gift to me, which I always appreciate, is you get me to go back and look at things, and I never had unlike where I've dissed myself on Daredevils and other things. I never had a negative self-feeling about the Milestone work, because I knew that I knew who I was working for even more so. And I know that I was really pushing myself. So while I hadn't reread it in a long time, I didn't have oh, I bet that sucks, mindset. But rereading it, I think the fact they are so discordant and they all have their own little kind of unique voices, or why son giving Brickhouse, shit, throughout the whole thing or whatever. You can play those moments, they're almost like they're not tropes so much, but you've got your Seinfeld Kramer coming in the door type of things that you can lean on as a starting point, and which is a lot easier and more interesting, because you're kind of stirring the pot than when everybody just gets along, right? We are the worst case scenario of a Justice League of America. And there's certainly been great runs on Justice League, but there's also been runs where we're all icons of virtue and we're sitting on our satellite, and and who's saying this line? It could be any one of us,
So you were talking about getting down on yourself. Do you think part of like you mentioned the Daredevil stuff? Do you think it's part of it is just with this Blood Syndicate story, you were 2 and out, and it's like, okay, yeah, the characters are going to keep going on, but here's my story.
The tail end of the series too. On top of that, so
that works.
They only went to 35. So
I was going to say, at least with your story, there's a beginning and an end, even though the characters are going to go on for a little bit longer. With Daredevil, it's like you were on there for years, so is it just like it's such a different animal where it's like, okay, well, I got to set stuff up, so 6 months from now I can pick this up. A year from now I got to pick up, Matt.
Well, even 30 years later, you can go back and answer a question.
Right. No, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. Really, I considering the length of time I was on Daredevil, and the fact I did some good work on it, and I should be less judgmental, but maybe that's why, I was more judgmental, in a way that I felt like did I really get to where I wanted to go on that with all the things I could have done? Whereas maybe you're right. Maybe the contained nature of a Blood Syndicate allowed me to lean very carefully and considerately into this. And granted, there is huge power in having a contained story, even if it's 2 issues or 1 issue, where it's not the one and done nature of it. It's the containment of it, right? With a month, this has always been we talked about this before, but the bane of the monthly comic is that, you're always having to string out something else. And no matter how many times you defeat the Kingpin, you're going to defeat him again. He's coming to come back because somebody's going to want him.
Yeah, what do they call that? Procedural rot or seasonal rot? Or what is it? I forget the term for it.
They should.
But it's something like that.
Right. That's definitely, what it is. Because, there's no dramatic. I mean, my first conceit on Daredevil was we got to stop playing the game of the Kingpin taunting Daredevil and Daredevil saying, taunt me again or cross me again, I'm taking you down. And he never does. Right. So my moment of genius, quote unquote, was, saying, well, you know what, let's actually take him down, which nobody had ever done before. Right. In that instance. Now they've done it several times, right? They've he's going up and Daredevil is taking him down. He's going up and Daredevil takes him down. But I think I was probably the first one to really have him taken down in a way that you could actually say, all right, he's out of the picture for a bit. But I think the contained nature of it does allow you to just say, here's some structure, here's the beats. And it was also interesting. There was just enough denouement to be fancy about it, even with this, where the ending kind of had a nice little glide path to it, right? It didn't end abruptly. We've talked about sometimes I've done things before where, it feels like the story ended and it was like, I'm out, and a little too harsh. And I really, at least for myself, appreciated this little extra beat at the end of this story where, after all the shit Wise Son has given Brickhouse throughout the whole story, he kind of goes back in and tries to make amends in an awkward, overly, non-emotional man sort of way. I'm saying sorry without having to say I'm sorry, so.
Do you remember any conversations with the artists? Because if I remember right, there's 2 different art teams for each of the books, right?
Yeah. I don't remember any real discussions beyond probably, maybe calling them up and saying, "Wow, this looks great." When I saw the art, but I think it was more. And I wish I had, had a chance to kind of interact with them more in retrospect. I don't know that would have changed anything. I think what they did was fantastic. The character design, the way things were communicated, the storytelling was all, really sharp. There was nothing that had me scratching my head or saying, wow, that's really bad, or that doesn't work, or et cetera, et cetera. So, so I really feel like it came together, but I think I don't remember any collaboration discussions.
Okay.
But yeah, no, I was just, that was my previous question, the last, the Daredevil thing. Now, I'm sure in your headspace, you're probably, this is your art teams. But when you came on here, or even we mentioned, Wolverine when Larry Hama was there, it's are you in a different mind space of this is someone else's and you're just.
Yeah. And
does that change your creative process or your thought process at all, where it's just this is someone else's?
You're trying to be, editorially, somebody's going to tell you can pick up the baton here and you got to land it here. Right. That might be some editorial direction you've got to follow. But my mind was, I wanted to be respectful to the book and to whatever was going on. So I don't remember who I was picking it up from or where it was going for those last, few issues. But in addition to the Bible, Dakota, reading whatever surrounding issues there were available, would be, I want this to feel like it's part of the world, right? I'm not here to tell a good story. And I hope somebody goes back and looks at my name in the credits and says, oh, that was that guy with the pretentious sounding name, has told a nice story. But I think you want to serve the readers in the right way there and make it feel like Lilith sounds like she felt like, okay, this is part of the, the world. So that was always my, my sense. But the Wolverine one, in comparison to the question you just asked, I remember talking to Darren a lot on that one and having many more collaborative discussions about the art for whatever reason, even on those two issue Wolverine things. It was just, who picked the phone up first and how many times we talked to each other and et cetera, et cetera. But I think that's your, if you're taking something over,
yeah.
And then, you're going in a drastically different direction, for one reason or another, or you've been told to do that, or you feel you have to break away from quote unquote, whatever crap was done before to set things up, then you can skew, in some crazy direction. You should, it kind of helps you break it away. I mean, when I took on Daredevil, coming off Anne's run, Anne Nesenti's run, and Anne is brilliant, beyond comparison, but, and very unique voice. My mindset, for whatever, reason, was to kind of go back to this harder Daredevil, so that was a pretty big break, I think, between Anne's last issue and my first issue, even though I really didn't know what I was doing then. so that was definitely a break because now it's quote unquote mine, and I'm going to run with that. But here, I had a responsibility. I would think I would have thought about having a responsibility to the characters and the flow of the book.
Now, I'm going to ask you a question, and you can decline to answer.
Oh, boy.
To keep yourself out of hot water. But I know, like, even though Milestone fell under, like, DC, they didn't have any of the same editorial collaborators, and that's kind of what, like, actually set it apart, in my personal opinion. So did you find it, like, a easier flow or just different?
I didn't, they
were
all
working with regular DC editorial. Especially at that time.
Yeah, I think that's right. Editors are about the people that are behind that title, right? And so I generally think, for the most part, I always had good experiences with editors. Maybe because also I came from being an editor myself. So I don't think there was an overt, at least at that time, from the DC work I did, the small amount of DC work I did, like an overt corporate influence or whatever. And the Milestone guys were all professionals at the top of their game, right? They were a small group, right? They were a smaller division. And
very close.
It's like,
yeah.
And they were on them, they knew they had something special, and they were doing all they could to maintain and build on that. So to my mind and reflection, they were just, very professional to me, considerate to me. I can't remember like the specifics of the interactions, but I certainly don't remember any. Oh Jesus, that was a grind, getting that through or anything. Quite the contrary. And I don't remember working with Matt as much, Matt Wayne. But I remember Joe Illidge more. That's also probably because I've been more in touch with Joe over the years. But no, I mean, they were just, like people who knew their world, who respected you, meaning me as a professional. I think they probably brought that to everybody they worked with, and so wanted your input and wanted the contributions that you would bring to their world. If there was any beef, and I wish I could remember, but rereading it now, there's so many like faux curses, or swear words in the dialogue, and instead of curses, for folks who haven't seen the books, I guess the Milestone thing was to do this little like scribble, instead of saying, you shit or, fuck you or whatever, it's this little black scribble. I just don't, it's just weird to me to like see that. I can't imagine that I wrote a script with that many, words that had to be looked at like that way. I would hate it when I would, and it was always a code, I was always writing basically for the code, even if there wasn't a code on it. And I know I hated it on Daredevil when I would write a line like, that's bull or that's BS. And then months later, I'd find that Ralph Macchio or Pat Garrett, he had changed it to baloney. That's baloney. Like, like it was something from a 1940s, Abbott and Costello comedy. So looking at this in retrospect, again, I can't remember. But I would rather have had a strong word that we could use in a lot of those instances than so many, these little scritchy things.
So do you think this was quite the opposite, where instead of like toning down your language, they added more squiggly curses?
Maybe, that could be it too. Maybe they took like, you're a jerk, and I wrote something like that, and then they scribbled it out to make it look like it was quote unquote tougher. Because I can't imagine I would have written that many lines with that, because there's a lot of them. There's a lot of it as you go through. It's all these kind of things, and maybe that was just a Blood Syndicate thing that I just hadn't picked up on. Certainly they did the translations for Aqua Maria. That I wrote the line. I didn't know, Spanish, at all, and so except maybe a couple of small phrases. So it's kind of cool that they took what I wrote and then they translated it her native language.
Oh, was that okay? I was going to say, was that one of your requests, or is that just something they did on the book?
I think they did.
Yeah, I think it's like, it's great. It's cool. It's kind of like, it just feels like, oh, I don't know what she's saying, but you can see, you can kind of, you get the gist of it from her body language or other people's reaction, to her, which works really well. maybe because she doesn't say a lot. So, if she was saying an extended monologue, that might be different.
And, well, yeah, Ivan, obviously, who was like the majority wrote most of it,
Yeah. No, totally.
And I know you want, like, again, you said, you wanted to fit the tone of the book, make it seem seamless, but there seemed like there was a little more creative freedom here than, like, say, like the Wolverine, because again, 1990s Marvel Wolverine, were they more protective of Wolverine because it was such a brand then? No.
I mean, they I have to credit Bob Harris, on Wolverine. I think he was the editor. It was certainly his group. I think it was the editor. They let me do whatever the hell I wanted, right? And I remember just saying to Bob, early on, because I was trying to promote Terror, hey, can I bring this guy in that I've created? We've got his own book, and we give him a little more spotlight. Yeah, whatever. And they thought the story was fine, and there wasn't any ripples, with that. There weren't any big changes, and that I could recall, and I feel the same, with this. I mean, clearly I was bringing in my influences and interests, in this way. Obviously, that was when I was so cinched into early issues of Wired magazine and Mondo 3000 and whatever. And, I was very much ahead of the curve at that point on the digital early internet, early technology space. And so clearly I was bringing that to bear on the villain and saying, how am I going to combine, all these books, supernatural books, which clearly I was pulling my voodoo references, for the villain, but then combining it with the technology stuff. So that was a unique spin that I was trying to bring. And clearly they seem to have supported it. And if anything, helped me, pull it off. So it didn't feel, like awkward cult leader, 101, it felt kind of, interesting to me. It's still read, well, that's pretty cool. The patois, dialogue style of the villain Soulbreaker, I wish I could go back and fix that. Some of that just jangles my nerves a little bit. But.
All right. Well, so with all of that, I mean, as a creative, do you think the 90s were the company's a little more open to trying new things than, say, like the previous decade or any of the previous decades before? Did they kind of open up in the 90s and were like, hey, let's try, you got a gimmick, let's try this gimmick or this story? Or
I'd say Image probably ushered that in more than anything, probably the effect that Image had on everybody.
Well, you mean like universe-wise, Lilith? Yeah, or how do you, well, certainly like in terms of blowing out more worlds, right? Everybody suddenly had a universe. Everyone had a new group of books. And I think that was certainly probably, part of Dwayne's sell, right, to DC or whatever. Like, here's a universe that's fully baked, plus, you're getting this powerhouse set of creatives, plus you get, you can check your diversity box, with what we're bringing in. We're going to bring in new talent, new creators. I mean, it just, power on every level there. But I mean, obviously all I can compare things to is when I was there starting in 84, 85 and, up through, the end of the 90s. And I never, rarely saw heavy-handed editorial influence. Now, I could have just been really lucky, and I know in some cases I was. I mean, I was certainly really lucky with the artists I worked with, and notwithstanding, the emotional, professional trauma of some of the interactions that had me booted off books I thought I would be on, for a long time. I never ran into any of that stuff, and I think there would certainly be instances where people would, but I think there was a lot of general freedom. Now there would become things where there would be events, right? Hey, it's it's Carnage time or whatever, so Carnage has to appear in every book and these have to kind of trickle through here. But, those would be more baked into event situated things that would either be within the Spider-Verse or the X-Men universe. And if it crossed over and you had to pick up on it, then that's where you went with that. Right. And that's, but I never really found that there was problem that took away freedom, or that it was more free. It just was what it was. And I've said before, on things, sometimes it was just me and two other guys going to a diner and figuring out a storyline and coming back and pitching it to the editors, and they're like, yeah, great. Whereas now, to my understanding, in some instances, I've heard that it can be a lot more editorial top down. I don't know that for sure, but that's what I've heard in some cases.
Well, yeah, I think we've talked about that. I mean, is the nature of the business just a little different? Because, yeah, before you guys would work in the same space, right? And then, yeah, you would go out to lunch, discuss these ideas. A lot of people probably, especially these, the after times, probably work from home and don't, are just like emailing or, Skyping or Zooming with their teams.
Same thing though. Then too.
It's Teams, Phil. It's Teams.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
God.
I should have known. Yes.
It's like, I was on Twitter recently, and, they pop up the little thing,
I'm so
you should
sorry.
follow. I know, exactly. Yeah, I know. Dirty word.
Come be on high.
It popped up and said, you should follow Microsoft Teams. It's like, what the fuck algorithm are you running? You gotta follow Microsoft Teams.
Thank you, Elon.
Exactly.
Buy this product.
But that's how freelancers have always been. Nobody was in the office, very rarely. I mean, you had the people who were in the New York area or might come to visit New York. Clearly we didn't have email, until the tail end of that time, maybe the beginnings of email. So everything was phone and sometimes fax. Mostly, I know, right? But mostly, mostly phone, interactions. And so, the people who would go in the office would be the people who would be local or semi-local, but a lot of people you'd never meet, and you'd only interact with them, remotely. And that was, that's the nature of the beast then. That's the nature of the beast, now.
I guess I just have this.
You have the bullpen idea.
Yes, as a kid, I just had the bright, shiny version in my head as a kid. It's just like, oh yeah, they all sit around the table.
Well, that was
a
the
cigar,
thing, right?
like Mad Men.
I used to do the tours. Marvel would do tours once a week, and one of my first jobs, there was doing the tours because people would say, "I want to visit Marvel Comics," and so that Marvel would do a tour, and they get a couple interns, dress up as Spider-Man, the Hulk, and like these cheap costumes, and come springing out at one time. But essentially, you're taking them around an office, and and this is the X-Men offices, and somebody would wave, and maybe we'd have a couple posters to hand out, and this is the Mighty Marvel bullpen. But the Mighty Marvel bullpen was the production artists. I mean, fabulously talented people, but they're there to make corrections and put the books together, and re-letter something at the last minute or draw a line in at the last minute, and that sort of thing. That's what the bullpen did. There wasn't. Well, Walt Simonson might have been in one day, right? And you might point out to somebody, "Hey, that's Walt Simonson," and the artist, the creator on Thor or whatever. But some people you would never point out because they would curse the kids out, so you don't want to do that. Get away from me, you rotten kids! I don't care that you pay my bills. But sometimes you just don't want to call people out because you don't want to. They weren't looking for that attention that day. But yeah, in your head, you want the bullpen to be, that sort of thing. Now, let's also be clear: the bullpen was at its best, a lot of fun, a lot of goofs, a lot of talented people. So, you had plenty of crazy things where when Jim Novak ran the bullpen, Jim Novak, well known for being a famous letterer and stuff. And when he ran it, he had a bullhorn outside his office, that he would broadcast, over, and wrestling matches start, and whatever, whatever time. And then you had the spirit of Mark Grunwald, from editorial, always hosting, some crazy interaction, not even on holiday days or way, but just, it's jumpsuit day. Everyone's going to come in wearing a jumpsuit.
Has anybody written that book? That's the book I want.
If you follow Greg Wright, and I keep telling him he should turn it into a book. Greg has a fabulous memory and a great writing style, and he often sort of documents, some of these things. And I just keep telling him, you need to put these into like collect these into a book.
Yes.
He really recounts it far, far better than I ever could.
Yeah.
Do we have to get like a petition to make them do it? What do we have to do?
Oh.
Yeah, I think so. I think a petition would be great.
Yes, everyone jump on your local social media.
Even
Follow.
better, he can do it on a Kindle novella. He can just write one at a time and get paid per chapter that way.
Yeah, totally.
To see if it works.
Everyone jump.
A ton of them.
Everyone jump on your social media. Follow Greg Wright and say, yes,
you writing his
no,
memoir.
yeah. Tell him you need to write this book. DG Chichester told us to pressure you into writing this book.
Absolutely, go for it. Run with it. You have my full support.
Here, kids, here's the tour. There's Fabian writing the contract so we can keep the soda machine in the lobby.
Uh-huh.
Did you know coming in that it was only going to have like 3 more issues when you came in, or?
I cannot recall. I don't know. I don't think so.
It felt 35 felt wrapped up, but of course, as always, it felt like it could be more. So I never knew if they just kind of like the axe just came down and they're just like scrambling to do the best that they could, or if they knew. I
mean, if editorial might have known it, they might have, might be one of those things, writings on the wall, type of things. But I don't recall that it was communicated in that way to me. Hey, but that could also have been an explanation as to why, they need.
Yeah, because like looking back at the writing trajectory, it's just like all of a sudden Ivan and Criss Cross both left at the same time, and I'm like, I wonder if they were going out handing out their resumes or something.
Well, maybe, right? They may have gotten word that it was kind of going, and they may have decided to leave earlier, because rather than keep going right, straight through. Maybe they had. I don't remember what they moved on to, after that, but maybe whatever they were going to move on to started sooner, and they said, well, this is going to end, and as much as we love it, as much as we've contributed to it, we've got to watch out for ourselves, and something else might have said, well, we want you to start now. I don't know that, but that I could see I could see that as being a strategy, right?
Was the filling guy? Would they tell you that?
Probably not, but
no, not necessarily. I mean,
but maybe you did get a little more creative leeway if you wanted it, because it's like, well, if they knew, or like,
well, when you're toward the end of your run on something, when something's wrapping up, and it's just going to be done, then and that you have leeway to do whatever the hell you want. I mean, the last quote unquote issue of Daredevil, right? That last issue before Quesada and Kevin Smith, came on, when they relaunched the numbering, and Tim Toohey came, to me and then Lee, and said, I'd want you guys to do this last issue, right? Nobody cared. I mean, I think it's a great issue. I mean, I've always felt very satisfied with that story, and everything we did on it, but nobody cared at that point, right? Tim, I jokingly, at one point in some interview or other, said Tim was the lame duck editor, not to take anything from Tim, because Tim was a real editor.
Yeah.
And gave me a gift of doing that and was very instrumental in making the story stronger. But nobody, like, it didn't matter. You're just
it's
holding.
like your presidential pardon.
No, it's more, he's just, I'm sure the attitude was like, you're just keeping pace until the real next editorial team comes on and the real new people come on.
Just get us a monthly Daredevil book out.
Just get us, yeah. So it was like we could have done anything we wanted, and you knew that was the environment. You knew it was like, this is it. This is the last one, and so literally we went out with a bang.
He didn't know that was the Blood Syndicate was coming to an end, Lilith, because Tara didn't show up to meet the Blood Syndicate.
Let me cross one more universe. Let me see if I can go from Shadowline to Marvel, jump to Milestone. Yeah, exactly.
He's like, what's his face? Who was on SVU, man? He, Tara's going to show up. Yeah. In like 10 different universes. Yeah,
exactly. Just keep moving him around.
His signature character.
Did you have a favorite character that stuck out to you while you were writing?
Again, and this is coming more fresh, rereading it. I did feel they were all very distinctive and had their own identity and characters, but and maybe it's just the way it's strung out and the way he stands out. But I think Wise Son just just sort of rose to the top for me again. But probably because he was contrarian and had as much of a mini arc in this as anything. You know, he spends the majority of the 2 issues, you know, giving Brickhouse shit and you know, insulting her and stuff. So the fact he sort of does a little bit of a, not quite a babyface turn at the end, but you know, he sort of shifts a little bit. I just thought the character was interesting to me and it felt like he was speaking in his own voice versus me putting words in his mouth. So to me, that you know, that worked out stronger than any of the others.
So so these, we said they're like fully formed characters. So it's when you have previous writers who put out good content, it's easier to like just jump in and fill in and correct it, you know, rather than just like, oh, hey, these are fully formed characters, other than just like, oh no, these were the standard, you know, copy and paste 90s characters.
Right. You know, yeah, there's a distinction, you know, to them. And you sort of understand, you can get a sense of understanding of what Ivan, you know, in this case, you know, was trying to do or was doing, you know, and what you were accomplishing. And again, maybe that's just my point of view of taking on assignments like that, but I think it's the responsibility to the reader and, you know, to the creators. Like I knew Lilith or didn't know. I'm not sure if he was coming back or not. But you know, trying to leave the toy box in the right place, you know, where before I'm not coming in to, you know, break all your toys. I'm coming in to play with your toys and then, you know, leave the place in a good setup afterwards. I remember on Acclaim, I think, or Valiant, you know, there was a couple of issues of something. I can't remember what. I have to go look it up. But Len Kaminsky was the regular writer on it, and they wanted me to come in and just script it. He had plotted it, but I had to go in and script it. Which is tricky too, right? Because so I think I had Len's plots to work off of, but I called Len anyway. You know, I don't remember if it was a bad reason that Len wasn't doing it or was just a scheduling reason, but I knew Len, you know, and I wanted to kind of say, what were you trying to do here? And you know, so he gave me, you know, some insight and that helped, I think, keep it more true to where he was going.
Yeah, I did enjoy his Iron Man run. All right. Any other questions, Lilith?
No, I'm glad that you weren't beating yourself over this one though.
Yes.
I totally get why you weren't, because it was very good. Yes. I was glad to hear that. I was like, I hope he didn't beat. Yeah, he did.
No, I really enjoyed it. I really think the villain worked. You know, he felt like, you know, even though he carried certain tropes, you know, this weird supernatural science cultish religious figure, which seemed to be, you know, a standard thing that I would pick off the shelf now and again, and you know, felt like it showed up probably in a lot of 90s. You know, feels like a very 90s character in a lot of ways. Again, except for the speech patterns a little bit, I think he feels real. He feels dangerous. You know, and I really enjoyed for myself the interaction of the characters and their support for each other. You know, and even the surrounding, you know, explanatory or expository, you know, captions, you know, felt like just the right balance of information and attitude without going overboard. You know, for as much as I can take credit for it, I'm sure there was editorial influence helping me along. It was a nice return to Dakota, and you know, getting a really nice sense of accomplishment out of it. So thank you to you guys as always.
Oh no, thank you for your time. All right, but next time, you've mentioned it. You've mentioned this book a few times. I'm like, we're going to get to this eventually. I remember reading it. We're going to do What If 73. We're going to start. What if the Daredevil? What if the Kingpin owned Daredevil? Was that how they phrased it?
What if? It was originally what if the Kingpin adopted Daredevil, and they changed it on the cover to what if the Kingpin owned Daredevil, which I don't know why, but we'll talk about that next time. Good one. Excellent.
And did you see, I guess they said they didn't say who he's playing, but they cast, what's his face? James Gandolfini's son in Daredevil Born Again.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
No, I didn't see that.
So now everyone's speculating, you know, who's he going to be? Is he going to be one of these, Is he going to be a current mob boss? Yeah. Is he going to be the Rose? Is he going to be someone else? Is he going to be like, are you going to do a flashback? Is he going to be young Kingpin? You know?
Well, possibly. I don't know. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I've seen. Yeah, I mean, he's a decent performer. I don't have enough invested into his, seeing him perform to know if, he carries, like for me to say, wow, that's certainly not like they got Charlie Cox back as Daredevil. That's like a sit up and take notice. If they gotten James Gandolfini, even irrespective of the fact he's dead, in this, then that would be like massively incredible, right? That would be the alternate Kingpin casting, right? That would be. But that's going to be really intriguing to see where they go with that show when they get to it.
But if they do the Rose, I would just love to be sitting next to Lilith to see that eye roll, just like, oh, Rose.
I mean, they did bring them back I feel like for a reason, maybe in the comics.
Oh yeah.
I'm just saying, speculation makes the internet go round.
You have to have a Netflix, not Netflix, but like a Disney Plus, watch party, when it happens. So
yes.
See the eye rolls in real time.
Lilith buried under 4 dogs, just like, oh, come
on. Soon to be 5, probably.
Oh, geez. Ouch. All right. So, yes. Again, thank you so much for your time, as always.
Thank you, guys. Everybody who's listening, check my newsletter out, storymaze.substack.com. Thank you much for reading and subscribing and all that good stuff. There's my plug. And back to you.
And if you have a convention, invite this man.
Oh, there you go. Even better. Yes. Give me easy to get in touch with me. Thanks, guys. Have a great weekend, and I will look forward to seeing you guys in about a month or so. In 2023.
Yeah.
What are we going to do?
Yep.
All right. Have a great holidays and great New Year's celebration. We'll talk soon.
We do. Thank you, sir.
Same
Thank
to you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.